Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to video number 3 in the Skymaster F4 build series. Just wanted to give you a view of everything that's going on. We've got planes all over tables and workbenches and stuff, and these things are going together very well. So we'll continue on with the build of the twin F4s. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, give the video a thumbs up, hang tight, and we'll dive back in to the build of these aircraft. All right guys, last video we pretty much completed the wings. We've got the servo covers to deal with in this episode, and then we've got to make light lenses for the new F4. That's basically wraps up our wings, which is great. When we're done the wings, we're going to move on to the tail section, I believe, and then do a couple things that's just going to consume some time along the way, so it's better if we get those things done now. So let's dive back into these wings. All right guys, cover plates, fairly straightforward. These ones are going to be a little bit, perhaps a bit of a pain in the butt. Reason for that is you've got 2 servo arms. So if you tuck it in this way, you need to be able to tuck it in that way. So you kind of have to oversize these a little bit in order to make it work. But what we're going to do is just kind of ease into this. So I've marked off, just kind of do this in steps. So marked off here where we need it with the flaps up, and then go to where we would need it with flaps down. We'll do the same thing on the aileron side. So we've got our center marked. We can go to our extremes. And there we've got kind of our marks for everything. And then what we can do is do our, I call them our front back or vertical marks. Now the only thing is those front back marks, we may need excess to go too far and then come back. So those will kind of be determined by actually getting these things installed. All right guys, the hatches have been installed and they worked out good, no issues with them. It actually was fairly easy to get them into place, even with just the right amount cut. So you kind of put one side in and just pops in place, so no problems there. Last thing we're doing on the wings here is working on the lights. And we need to install the lights first before we make the little lenses. And that brings up today's video sponsor. And today's video has been sponsored by SOLDERSTICK. I have quickly learned to absolutely love these connectors. Totally questioned them before, and then I had the opportunity to do the test on them. The test video is linked down below, and this is a perfect opportunity to use these connectors, and this is just such a simple, quick way to do these, this connector that I'll show you right now. Now you guys can get discount at their website, so solderstick.com. If you use the discount code RC20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off your order. So use it, try them, they're amazing. So scenario like this, we could use a soldering iron, but the solder stick connectors are just so much easier. So let's pull these guys out and I'll show you how we use these things. All right, so this is the 500 piece kit. These tiny little wires, we could either use the white ones or the red ones. In this case, we'll use the white ones because we need them to be as small as possible to tuck into the wing. Now what I've done here is I have taken off about 3 millimeters of the sheathing on each wire, and what we'll do is we'll simply put the connector on one side and we will put the other end together like this. Now I like to interweave the wires if possible. It's not always possible, but it's a better way to do it for sure. So get that in place. Now I've really enjoyed using a lighter with these connectors. I've shown it in my other videos, but there's a little bit of a specific way to use the lighter. So you want to do the ends first to get them kind of shrunk. And I make sure I have the blue flame over the connector. So, and then once they start to shrink a little bit, I work it back and forth. And the center section is starting to melt. So now we'll focus it on the center. And I can see the solder starting to flow. And it's that easy, guys. Super simple system. I've done all the tests with them. If you question them as well too, that's totally awesome. Same thing I did, but definitely check out the test video linked in the description below. But use discount code RC20 to get 20% off your solder stick order, and we're going to do some giveaways as well too. All right, so giveaway time as well. Thank you, SolderStick, for providing some kits to give away. Now, I don't have the kits yet in my possession, but they have provided some kits, I think the 50-piece kits, as giveaways. So we're gonna give one of those 50-piece kits away, and you have to do some specific things in this video to enter that giveaway. So what you need to do is, number one, you need to make sure you are a subscriber down below, so hit that subscribe button. Number two, you need to give the video a thumbs up, that's important. And number three, you need to use the word solder in your comment below. So you have to make a comment, doesn't matter what it is, but you have to use the word solder, S-O-L-D-E-R, in your comment. So be creative. Love seeing the comments. Use the word solder. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and use the word solder down below. About a week, week and a half after this video goes live, we will pick a winner in a future video. So thanks, SolderStick, for sponsoring this video. Thank you for providing the giveaways for this video as well. So we got the lights installed in the wingtips, so those are all done. And what I've done is I've molded one of the lights. So I've molded the green lens here, which is that one right there. So just basically takes a lot of time and a lot of work to get those molded. This is what it starts off as, is just a hunk of epoxy with coloring in it. And we mold it to make that shape. So I fortunately do have the cutout still, so that gives us kind of a general template to go off of. But basically it's just trial and error and getting it fit now. Yeah, so I'm going to continue on with the red one and show you guys the final results. Then what I do is don't worry about the scratches on it, and then you just take clear coat and you spray clear coat over top of it, and it makes it all nice and shiny. All right, so lenses are all installed. They worked out really nice, and I just use CA to put those in place, and then after that's installed, just use some flat red Tamiya paint and just touch up around the edges, but that's the green side. And there's our red lens right there. So worked out awesome. I should let a ton of light through because the lenses aren't very thick, and it's going to be nice. So I like that. So I think the next thing we'll do before we take a pause today is we're going to paint the control linkages on the underside. All right, so with the wings completed, we are now moving on to our tail section slash fuselage. Okay, so just took the tail pieces off the old kit, and everything's pretty similar. You can see a little bit of a difference here. So on the old kit, they've wrapped carbon all the way pretty much to the edge here. So that is something very obvious that's different. If you look at the new kit, it's still very stiff. So there's not like there's extra flex or anything, but I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera. I think it will, but you can see the edge of the carbon right there underneath the foam. So there is carbon in this area, but not quite as much as the old kit. Now, one thing that's a little different with the rudders here is on the old kit, there is a blind nut installed, and there's a hole drilled in the fuselage so that you basically bolt the rudder on like this, and that's what holds it in place. The new rudder, there's no blind nut here. Maybe there is, but it's not exposed. So what I'm going to do is get this lined up. We're going to open this up right exactly where it should be, and hopefully there's a blind nut hidden underneath there. If not, we're going to have to figure something out. So that's one thing we got to get done as well. The rudder on this kit also needs to be hinged. On the old kit here, it looks like there's already some slots done, and I don't know if there's, oh yeah, there's already holes on the surface side. The new one, I'm not sure, but there's obviously not holes cut out for the hinges, so that's one more thing that we need to do there as well. All right, and just a little cool factor thing here. This is the first time I've opened up the tanks. This is the center tank for the new aircraft, and Skymaster matched the scheme on the drop tanks with super cool. Thank you, Skymaster, for doing that. That is a nice touch. So we did a bit of gluing on both kits, and this brings up this episode's tip time. And this episode's tip time has been brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. Thanks, Trusty. Okay, so this tip time revolves around West Systems maximizing your batches that you mix. Now, I know some folks talk about marking out half pumps and things like that. Haven't done that on my West Systems pumps yet. So when I mix a batch of West Systems, it usually ends up like that much in this 3 1/4 ounce cup. So it's a fair bit to deal with. So what I do is try and batch as much stuff as possible. So in this case, I had to add carbon cloth. Now this is the old kit. I had to add carbon cloth under this area for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is a real floppy area and we need to stiffen it up. And then we also need to level it out too. That's why the support is there getting glued. So it was very floppy. So I don't want a tank mounted on there and the center tank and it being an issue. So and these were those old openings. So I laid down the carbon cloth, got that all done. And then I had, I don't know, maybe a half of my batch still left in here. So what I did was mix up some Cabasil silica beads, basically. Bob, thank you for this. I'm still using this stuff. Haven't done the test video yet, but this is awesome. I love this. So you mix that up and it's almost like, you can mix it to any consistency you want, but you can see there around the blocks, it ends up like Vaseline. So it's like using the West Systems 610 stuff. So anyways, I mixed that up and then we're able to glue the rear mount down, the front mount down, the rear mount in the new kit down, and also a tank and a front mount stiffener all the way across the fuselage here. So that goes from this point all the way to that joint. So it's clamped right now and it'll be nice and cured tomorrow. Now this area in this new kit where all the tanks are going to sit is very floppy. So we need to deal with that. Probably going to have to do more, but this is the first step, and this is going to stiffen up that that whole front section where the tanks are going to mount. Obviously, we want to do this as light as possible. I mean, we could just lay a whole bunch of fiberglass or carbon in the front there, but if we can do it lighter, that's better. So in doing all that stuff, basically used my entire batch of West Systems that I mixed up. The other cool thing about using these products in this manner is you've got wet carbon cloth here, you've got wet piece of maple that has the Cabasil mixed in it, and that stuff is both wet still, so it's totally gonna chemically bond together, which is great. So very, very strong, nice setup and all that kind of stuff. So good way to do it, and that's today's tip time. I've been planning on doing a test video for a long time now using High-Sol versus Cabasil mixed with West Systems and other things like that. Just haven't got around to it yet, so maybe we'll do that this year. But we're letting these two things cure now, so we'll kind of have to leave these things till tomorrow. Can't really flip the fuselage over or anything like that. So I think that's probably it for tonight. Almost midnight, so we'll see you guys tomorrow, and for you it'll be like a fraction of a second. All right, guys, it's the next day, and our all of our glue and stuff there and our additions that we did last night worked out good. The West Systems stuff is still, it's kind of kicked off, but if I take my fingernail, I can still like gouge it out. So I'm just leaving the supports in place, but happy with how everything turned out. So working on the vertical stabs right now. My kit actually has two. So the One that I've shown in my previous clips and stuff had the little cutouts there. I don't think we need those little cutout pieces, so I'm going to set this one aside. This is the older one. I could tell because it's got like super old tape that I had to like scrape off. And this is the new one here. The new one doesn't have any of the pinholes or anything added, so we're starting fresh, just like as if we're doing the new kit here. Now the new kit has the holes already done, just small holes on both the surface and the vertical stab piece. So we've got those. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use those reference marks and we'll mark them out matching on this one, and then we'll be able to drill those out, get the pins glued in. The manual says you're only looking for at least 25 millimeters of travel, which is that right there. Doesn't need a whole lot of travel, so if we can get a little bit more, I mean, if we can get 30 or 35 or more, that'd be great, but obviously we want to make sure it looks good too. So we're going to get those glued in place so we can pull those off and have it sit. That's the first thing we need to do, and then we'll get on to the horizontal stab, and then we'll come back to these and work on the lights on the new kit, because we've got a little light going back here, and we've got a kind of a cool light setup going right here as well. So those are the things that we need to deal with. I'm going to work on hinging these surfaces now. All right, so we're working on our rudders here. Now the rudder system, fairly straightforward. You've got two linkages. It's a pull-pull system, so it's very, very simple, and it's my favorite way, of course. So we've got clevises to put on here. Now, one of the things that I've noticed with the F4 kit is the servo is sitting up about probably a 1/4 inch in this pocket here that it's designed to sit in. And the reason for that is our wood structure comes all the way through. The new one is exactly the same scenario. This is the older kit. And it's important that we get that servo tucked down as much as possible, because you're kind of limited on clearance. So here is the channel that the elevator mount sits in. So elevator mount sits in like that, so very, very little excess room. And those two holes that I've cleaned out down here are where our linkages come through. Now, if we build up the servo mount here, the problem is that it's not a straight shot all the way back to our linkage setup. So we do need to sand out this wood structure there so our servo can sit down as low as possible, which is it's important. So we're going to do that, sand that out. One workaround, I guess, is if you went with a metal pull-pull system and you use ball joints on the bottom here, that might work. Downside then is you're limited to your movement, so you'd need a fairly wide servo arm to be able to do that. So anyways, I'm going to go the grind out route and grind that wood out. All right, so rudder is done on the old aircraft. Worked out good. It was definitely a bit of a bear to set this up. Now the manual calls for clevis. It's not ideal because the servo sits higher than the arm itself, so it's at a bit of an angle. Even if it's not, this works out okay as well. So we've got this all done. Everything's very tight with this, so the ball joints and everything are really tight. But anyways, it's done on this aircraft, so now we'll do the match to the new aircraft. One other thing is that wood and stuff that was underneath the servo, that definitely needed to come out. You need to pay attention to a bunch of the glue as well that's underneath there. Now we do have an issue with the new aircraft and the servo that's going in that aircraft. So that servo is an MKS 9930, and this one's got a little bit more depth and different dimensions up here as well. So it's not going to be an identical setup, but it'll be very close. Okay, so the second rudder is complete. There was better geometry and better setup on the new aircraft. The arm and the actuator arm here for the rudder itself is, it's a little bit different. On the old kit it's longer, this one has a different setup to it. It's basically the same setup, but the geometry is slightly different. But this is ideally how I wanted mine to be set up, but it wouldn't allow it. So this is really the right way to do it in my opinion. Everything's nice and tight, there's zero play, and it worked out good. So now both aircraft have their rudders complete. I think the next thing to do is to work on the horizontal stab setup. Now, I don't know exactly where the chute mechanism goes, but I'm pretty sure it comes on the outward face of all of this. So we can get all of this installed and still have good access to install that chute. So I'm hoping. So the next thing we need to do is, we can't really put the servos on here until we get the rudder done. So we'll take a look at the rudders and see how they're faring. But we want to get the rudder finished up and then the horizontal stab. All right, making some good progress on the tail section. We've got our wires done up for both rudders. We've got our wires created for the elevators as well too on both planes. Now, because we've got a single with a bipipe and a twin with two individual pipes, our wire routing is quite different. It's actually quite simple on the bipipe because there's, we're going to go off to the side. Anyways, we'll show you that later. On the twin, there's actually kind of limited area to bring the wire through. So the best spot is the center here, but not overly excited about the amount of material for these turbine mounts. So put a piece of carbon laminated ply onto that vertical, and that's being glued in place right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a piece of this fireproof tubing cover material, and that's going to run from this location right here to that large center hole right there, and then all of our tail wires are going to feed through that fire resistant tubing. Now for the tail section, we've got a rudder servo, we've got two elevator servos, and we're also going to have some lights as well too in our vertical stab. So those are all the wires that are going to run forward on this aircraft. So that's the stuff that we're working on. I did get the rudder mounted on the old airplane, and we will get the rudder mounted on the new airplane. But before we do that, we need to route our lights into the new airplane's rudder. All right, so before we can get the rudder on the new plane, mounted on the new plane, we got to get the lights dealt with. So we got two lights on the rudder itself. There's the pin light on the end here, which is a white light, and then there's this light here, which is a red light. So the pieces that Unilite includes with this is actually pretty cool, and it's going to be a neat setup. So this is pretty easy. We just cut it out with a pull saw, use an X-Acto blade on the ends there, and we'll obviously have to do some gray touch-up. That is pretty much the norm when you're cutting out something like this. The pin light itself, we kind of took this thing all apart, sanded the diameter down of the heat shrink piece, and now this is ready to be installed. Now this was quite precarious to get hollowed out, but we managed to do it and didn't wreck any of the rudder itself. So just used a Dremel bit and just took her very, very carefully. And once we got into this section right here, we were able to open it up to the bottom to allow a hollow space for the wire to come through. So I'm hoping that there's a channel coming along the leading edge, going all the way down to this part of the rudder. So we're going to run our wire next and see what happens. Once the wires run, we'll have a good handle on what we need to do, and then we have to create this red lens as well. All right, so our light has been installed for, I guess, the leading edge of the rudder. Now I'll explain this to you a little bit. These are actually pretty unique Unilights. I've never actually used these ones before. Now these are two separate units, and they're about this long, so they're about twice the dimension that you can see there. So what we did here is this came with a few different types of heat shrink material. So there's a long aluminum piece which we stuck a wire in, pulled it in place, C8 it in place, and that gave us a base to actually install these lights onto. Now the rudder itself, it's quite a piece of work to actually get everything routed through. So when you come through the back here, it actually goes on the underside of a rib, sits about here. So that's fine, opened up a hole through the bottom here, but then we had to put a little hole through that rib so we could run these wires straight down. So it definitely is possible, it just takes quite a bit of work. So next thing we're going to do is run the wire down to this point, and then we'll be able to slip in our other little pin light. That one's going to be far easier to install than this guy. Now our lens is also made as well. Now this isn't done yet. It's too big right now, but we're going to get that glued in place, and then we'll do our final shaping with a Dremel. And once that's done, then we will use some clear coat and just paint that on. That'll make it nice and shiny. All right, we are moving on to elevators, and this is going to be interesting. So I'll try and summarize this as best as possible. So the old Skymaster kit and the new Skymaster kit, essentially this portion is exactly the same. Now, the bolts that you think should go through this whole system, because these fit through the elevator, are the larger size ones. The downside of using the larger size ones is the aluminum brackets aren't drilled for it, and the pivot point down there is not drilled for it. So you have to use the smaller bolts. Benefit to using the smaller bolts is that's what it's designed for, but it allows you some pivot room with the elevator itself, because nothing is going to line up perfectly. So you have to get the arms put on, get everything kind of tightened up, make sure it's good and not going to move, and then you have your best access to the fastening hardware if you take this whole thing out. Now if you undo these two screws, the whole elevator assembly comes out at this point, so that's a good thing. The setup on the new plane is identical, with the exception that the elevator horns have 2 holes instead of 1. That's the only difference, otherwise they're identical. So, downside to Skymaster kits. I get quite a few guys contacting me, asking me, hey, I'm buying an A10 kit as an example. What hardware do I need to change? Now, every setup's totally different. So there's not just a list, but when I build an A10 or an A10 or pretty much any Skymaster kit that I've already built, I have an idea in my head of what we need to use, different from what Skymaster provides. Now, the F4s are going to have their own list. So my old F4 came with these nice big rods and these aluminum ball joints, which look really awesome. Downside to this setup is there is 0 side-to-side room. So one of my bolts here that goes in the side is actually drilled at a little bit of an angle, meaning that this thing sits sideways, which is just no good. So this setup, and I understand why Skymaster ditched this, the ball joints with no side-to-side play, just doesn't make any sense. So we're going to ditch that. So what they've done on the new kits is they have started providing their Skymaster 2mm ball joints. Now the downside of this is the 2mm screw that goes through here is much bigger than the screw that goes through here. So these also will not work. So we're going to ditch those as well too. And what we're going to end up using is some, these are Dubro ball ends. We're going to use the metric ones because that's what everything's drilled for. So we're just going to use Dubro heavy duty metric ball ends and do that up ourselves. So that's the solution for these elevators. So step number 1, get it installed and lined up. That's done. Fortunately, when you get the elevator installed, you can take the plate out still here, the servo mounting plate, and still have access to it. So that's what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get our servos set up. The manual also talks about putting your ball joints in the middle here. That doesn't work either because there's just no room to do anything in the middle, and we need room for our our chute shaft and stuff to come through here, so all our ball joints are going to end up on the outside. All right, so the elevators on this plane are definitely a bit of a challenge, and mainly because you don't have good access. The positive thing is you can still access these two screws, which I've screwed down, but you have to take the whole assembly out in order to screw the back side down, which we've got a little bit of play there that we've added in the servos sitting upwards is what I mean. So anyways, we are hooked up here now, which is good. Our rods aren't fastened. And we haven't done our servo balancing yet in the Jetty radio, but that's all part of the steps. So right now, both of our servos are hooked up to the radio. We've got servo movement, which is good. So what I did to do this was the measurement from your panel line right there to elevator center at neutral is 52 millimeters. Okay, so 52. So I just took a wooden dowel and I put it in the back here and kind of held the elevator up. When I put these servos in, to put the rods in, the servos are at neutral. So anyways, kind of getting everything as balanced as possible without having anything done up yet. So what we need to do now is we need to take our elevator linkages off like that, and then we'll take these servos out, finish screwing in the back side, and then we'll be able to put them back in for the last time, and that'll allow us to balance out the elevator servos in the radio. Okay, so our elevators on the old kit are complete, and I just wanted to show you here a close-up of the balance curve that we ended up having, right? So it's not an easy thing just to figure out. You basically have to go through and program it. And she works out good. So when everything's just sitting hunky-dory, you've got 0.7, 0.8 amps is pretty normal. And if we go to one extreme here, kind of sitting at 0.8 to 1.4, 0.14. Other extreme, 0.12. So we're doing pretty good for balance on those servos. I'm happy with it. So we're done on this old kit here. What we're going to do is we're going to repeat that exact same process on the new kit, and we're going to get that elevator completed, and that'll be one big step on both of these aircraft. Now we're going to be using a little bit of a different servo setup on the new aircraft. Obviously we're using MKS servos, and we're going to be using the center hubs with carbon horns. Now I think this is a 1-inch servo, so we're 25 millimeters center to center. I think the carbon one is 20, which actually is going to work out better, because if you look at our travel here to get full travel on the elevator, we've got a lot more wiggle room. So really, I could actually shorten these servo arms as well and get more movement out of those servos, better resolution, because we've got it. Like, this is the max travel that the actual openings here will even allow you to get. So it's it's not terrible, but we could definitely reduce those servo arms down. So we'll see how it works out on the new kit, and we may switch it out. I mean, it's not an overly difficult thing to switch out, but we'll see how it works out. All right, guys, elevators on the new kit are also done as well. Now, there's a couple interesting differences between the new kit and the old kit. I'll show you what the differences are here. So on the old kit, we've got like 2.5 millimeter hardware holding the arms onto the whole system. Now the holes going through the actual horizontal stab itself were 3 mil. But the nice thing about those oversized holes is it allowed us to position this elevator so it worked good. On the new kit, the bottom rotating pieces, so the bearing blocks, were 3 mil, and the surface was 3 mil. The arms up here were 2.5 mil. So we drilled those arms out, and we're using bigger hardware here. We also had to make the holes going through the surface just a little bit bigger, so we have some adjustment and leeway. So that's one of the differences. Also, our alignment here is very different. So we've gone from it's kind of a more straighter shot here. Ultimately, we're on the outside of the aluminum horns, and the carbon horns at 22 millimeters are kind of a better setup than the aluminum horns at 25 millimeters, although they're both very similar. On this one, we've gone with the inner setup, mainly because our servos we put tight together. I mean, that's just the way that ended up. Now, I was thinking about changing my setup, but I think I'm just going to keep all that the same. The other big thing is the amount of open space here. So if you look at, visually you'll probably be able to see it, but we're almost coming down to the top of that plate, right? You can look at that much space. And then you look at this one, we're actually quite a bit narrower this way, so we're going to sand this out. You can see where we've contacted the front of the fuse there, and we're quite a bit higher. So on the old kit, it limits you to 45 millimeters each direction. On the new kit, you can get more than that. So you can get like 55 maybe, but it's totally not needed. That's the thing. So I'm not going to do a ton on the old kit. What I am going to do is open it up lengthwise a little bit so we're not hitting the front of the fuselage there. So just some interesting differences. Also, the cover back here also is substantially more open on the new kit compared to the old kit. So on both kits, I haven't bolted everything down for the final time. The back surface I have, the front I've only put one through. Now we do have to do some things here. So we got to take the horizontal surface back off. Now the reason for that is our covers here, they need to go on like this, and a screw goes through there, and that is the pivot point where this all pivots. So that screw actually lines up right with the shaft that goes through the whole operating system there. So that's one thing we need to deal with. And on the new kit here, we need to add, we have enough room, we don't need to pull this one off, but I think on mine we may need to pull it off. But we need to add some wood behind there so we have something to screw into rather than just the couple layers of thin fiberglass. So that's one of the things we need to deal with. But elevators are really close. Definitely a lot of work. Nice to be at this point. All right, so we are mounting exhaust pipes. Now I didn't have any aluminum, so I had to pick some aluminum up today. Otherwise, we probably would have got this done yesterday. But these pieces of aluminum, what I've done is, this is just aluminum sheet, like 1/16, and I've just cut some bands and drilled some holes for the glue to bond onto, and that's our fastener hole right there. So what we're copying is the ones that were already done by the previous owner of this kit. So great way to do it. If you don't use these bands and you just like glue these exhaust ports in place, they end up flush with everything, which isn't actually to scale. The scale airplane or the full size, actually, these point down like this one. I don't know if it's going to be easy to tell, but they point down quite significantly. So that's what we're doing here. Now I've just kind of got these mocked up, held in place with some pieces of plywood. And then what I did to make sure I was happy with the angle is run a straight edge across the bottom of the fuselage and kind of match up that angle right there between the turkey feathers and the ruler. And then looking from the center here, just making sure that our gap on either side of the center section is even. So that's good. What I'm going to do first is, I've got these just sitting in place. I'm going to glue these first bottom bands on first, and we're going to let those set up, and then we'll glue the other two, probably using some CA to kind of tack them in place. And then we will use some high sol to glue them in place. So that's one of the things we're working on. Other thing was painting these tail hooks. Now we're not making these functional. The chute is going to take care of that. And but we want to put these on the aircraft because they look darn cool, and it suits the aircraft. So the standard tail hooks, like this dark color was the standard color. I prepped this all off, painted the white, pulled all the prep off, and that's what we're left with. So those turned out awesome. They're going to look great. And the way we're going to fasten these is 2 screws through the arm here. And these do need to be removable because that cover that goes right here, the tail hook sits over top of that. So while I was gluing some stuff up yesterday, our little backing plate pieces, I also glued in some 1/8 ply underneath here so we could screw those tail hooks in. So lots going on the tail end of this aircraft. I tell you, I will be happy when the tails of these aircraft are done. They're a lot of work, they really are. And there's a lot going on. It's a pretty tight area. You got to take things out, put things back in. The rudders are quite difficult because they're the design of the rudders isn't so awesome, but they work for what they're going to be needed for. So the next struggle we're going to have, which is in the next video, is doing the chute mechanism, which is going to be fun. So anyways, guys, I'm going to get to gluing here and I'll be back with you shortly. All right, guys, feels good to have some progress happening here. It's felt like the past couple nights have been a little bit slow. So we got the keyholes done here for the center tanks. On the old kit, it's already done. Fits quite well. It's fairly easy to do these keyholes. Basically what I do is get this all marked out and I drill the first hole, so using just a small drill bit. So drill this hole as a guide hole and then drill the back of the keyhole, and then we drill this one with the big one, drill this one with a proper size one, then I just take my Dremel and connect the keyholes. Now, if you remember when we were reinforcing the other side of the aircraft, we added a pine block on the inside here. So there's a substantial amount of material for this to clip on. And then our keyhole just works with the nut screwed on the bolt coming off the center tank. So that one's done, all simple. And then on the new kit here, I'm just getting ready to Dremel the connection point here, but that's basically how it looks. And then on our exhaust cones, those are all glued in place. We're just waiting for them to cure. All right, guys, and that is going to be everything for the video number 3 of the Skymaster F4 twin and single series. We got the tail sections mostly done in this video. Again, it's fairly sporadic on what we're doing, but the tail surfaces, the rudder, the elevators are now complete. Next video, we probably will be installing the chute mechanism because those are supposed to be arriving soon, and then we'll start working our way forward and probably start to get into the hot sections and some of the planning things and stuff like that. So lots of things going on these aircraft and everything's going quite well. So it's definitely been a nice challenge putting these two together. It's lots of fun. So thanks guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below. Feel free to email me, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. That way, if you email me, you know I'm probably going to see your email. If you comment down below, there is a chance if YouTube's being funny, I won't see it. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see ya in the next video.